Sunil Sinha, who's Director and Principal Economist India at Ratings and Research, joins in with his perspective. Sunil, great to have you on the show. Thanks very much for taking out the time. What is your own assessment on where bond yields will move? Do you think that this is just a correction that we're seeing in the bond markets? Or do you believe that this is just a readjustment to the new reality that perhaps the RBI may have to do a strong rethink on being accommodative at this stage, given the global environment and especially the pressure of rates going up in the US?
Look, I mean, if one looks at the outcome of the policy, then certainly, the market had already started factoring in a 25 basis point, cut. And as this cut did not come about, obviously, the readjustment had to take place. So the way the bond yields have started moving now is in response to the status quo that RBI maintained yesterday in its fifth biannual policy statement. So this adjustment will continue for a while, but thereafter, in my view, it will stabilize. And also the kind of expectation that has been building up, I mean, particularly after the demonetization, where suddenly a huge amount of cash, when it became available at the hands of the bank, suddenly that started getting reflected in the bond prices and the yield. And when RBI seized it by raising the CRR, suddenly the situation changed. But now, in my view, after yesterday's policy statement, it is unlikely that any sudden change is going to happen. I mean, things will be somewhat more granular in nature, and so the market would readjust to the new reality.
I wanted to talk about what your outlook is then when it comes to the upcoming policies, as to what you expect from the Reserve Bank, because a lot of the brokerages that have come out with their reports seem to suggest that in the month of February, it's a given that we'll see a 25 bips cut.
Look, I mean, let me put it into a little bit of perspective. When the RBI cut the rate in the October policy, I mean, our view was that RBI had actually front-loaded the policy cut, because I mean, if you look at the inflation trajectory, over the next 2 months, that is October to December and then December onwards, then it was quite obvious that inflation will soften somewhat from the levels that was known at that point of time. So, I mean, since that trajectory was by and large known, and it was quite obvious that even if there is some kind of a shock, it is unlikely to be very different. So RBI took the call and front loaded it. However, when the demonetization scheme came, and suddenly it had its impact on the economy in terms of demand compression as well as a deflationary tendency, then suddenly the clamor for another rate cut became so obvious, as if the rate cut in the December policy is obvious. However, our view was somewhat different. I mean, we believed that the rate cut has already been front loaded. So what is important for the December policy is not where the inflation would be in the month of December. What is important is that what kind of a trajectory inflation will take hereafter. And it is here that if you read the commentary of RBI, then it is quite obvious that even the prices of fruits and vegetables that has come down somewhat, how much is it because of the demand destruction and how much is because of the seasonal factor is not established as of now. Similarly, going forward, rupee has depreciated, oil prices are going up, and also there is expectation that Fed would raise the rate of interest. So all of that, if you factor in, then there is a certain amount of danger that there will be an imported component of inflation coming into the economy as well. Plus the domestic factors that is still playing out. One really doesn't know that the demand compression, because these are transitory in nature, and how long they will survive. So overall assessment of the situation, as RBI put it rightly yesterday, is that there could be pressure on inflation, and so in my view that certainly will determine the future course of RBI's action also. If you are talking about the February policy review, then in my view by then some few more numbers would be out in the public domain, and that will eventually determine, I mean, if the trajectory of inflation is somewhat different from what RBI is believing right now, then maybe there is a possibility of 25 basis point cut. Otherwise, I mean, if you read the October policy statement, RBI wants to maintain a real rate of interest somewhere around 1.25%. Now, if the inflation is 5% and your GSEC rate say hovers around 6.4, then the real rate of interest would be somewhere around say 1.4 or so. So there is very limited scope for RBI to really cut the rate of interest even in the February policy. I mean, unless and until inflation trajectory gives us a pleasant surprise.
All right, Sunil, we'll have to leave it at that. There's so much happening in the market right now. I just want to address it. But thanks very much for giving us your initial take on what the policy means for the macro situation going forward. But let's take it across to Gauri Dwivedi. Airtel is offering free voice calls to anywhere in India, and Gauri Dwivedi joins us with more details on that. Gauri, what do you